Hey guys, real quick before we start the video, I want to direct you to the community tab on my channel. I am currently running an event for you, the viewers, to rate every single Monster Hunter monster from 1 to 5 stars. This project is going to be a bit of a run back from the 20th anniversary popularity poll and is meant to allow everyone to voice their opinion on every monster, so we can get a big picture look at how the whole community feels about the entire Monster Hunter bestiary. There will be a new poll on the community tab every single day at noon Eastern Standard Time, and all polls will remain live on the channel, so you can answer any of them at any time. You will not miss out if you miss the poll for the day. I will be updating numbers all the way from now until the end of October when the last polls have been run, and in October or November, we're going to have a massive video event where your comments will be read, all the numbers will be crunched, and the monsters will be reordered based on how you all voted. Every vote on every poll matters, and anyone has a chance to have their comment read in the video itself. And if you want to help me get more data and reach the broader Monster Hunter community, I'd appreciate a like on this video and, maybe hit the subscribe button to help this channel grow. It'll put me and this project in front of more eyes. Okay, no more YouTuber CTA shilling. Here's the video you actually clicked on. Thank you. So, you want to hear me gush about more monsters that I think look pretty sick? You like that last video I did, so yeah, I guess I'm just gonna keep rolling with it. I think I'm one of many people who's looked at the monsters that's been in the Monster Hunter Wilds marketing, just right out the gate I'm thinking, damn dude, what on earth are you? You're different. Now, some people seem a little split on whether or not that's a positive thing or negative thing. Personally, I'm on team positive. I like these freaks a lot so far, man. And that goes for, both the general artistic and behavioral design that we've been seeing, the really obvious stuff. And there's stuff about these monsters that I think spells out some good potential news about the overarching design and gameplay of Wilds. And I'm going to speculate on that a little bit as we get into this video. I think because of, what we're seeing and what we know about the monsters in this game, that there's some reason to believe that Wilds might be dealing with some of the lacking difficulty complaints that were brought about by mostly Monster Hunter Rise and a little bit by Worlds. But let's talk about the surface level cool first. So start off with Doshaguma. I mean, dude, look at this big, lumbering, fugly looking juggernaut. This thing looks like it's made out of nothing but fur and muscle and ripped up flesh and just a simmering hatred for anything that moves. I mean, you gotta look at these big, foul-tempered tanks in the trailers, dude. They're flinging dead herbivores around. They're punching above their weight class with that railgun wyvern thing. They're 2v1ing the Balahara. They're beating one another up. These guys saw their reflection in a watering hole one day and just held a permanent grudge against God and the rest of his creatures for the rest of their lives. You wanna know what I think is pretty sick? There's some people who don't think that Doshaguma looks like all that much of a conventional Monster Hunter monster. He's not super overtly cool. He's not really all that cute either. Sometimes they go that direction. He's just straight up ugly. In a good way, in a way that works, in a way that's deliberate. You really gotta actually see him up and moving around and throwing moves for it to really click that this dude belongs in Monster Hunter. He definitely kind of breaks some design conventions in the series. And then you take that into consideration and you realize that Capcom had the balls to lead with him, The guy has had a big moment in all 3 of the trailers we've seen for the game so far. He's the first original Wilds monster that we got a good look at. A lot of people are comparing Doshaguma to Anjanath, and the comparison, I think, is fairly apt. He's not the biggest and baddest animal around, but he is big, and he is a badass, and he has a similar aura of being the look at what our game is going to do type of monster, if you know what I mean. That's the aura that Anjanath carried very well. Doshaguma is a pack animal, traveling around with a big savage entourage of other Doshaguma. This pack feature seems to be a huge component of the game. It even looks like there's some fur distinction between a pack alpha and the underlings. He's got turf wars with other creatures, much stronger and much weaker than him. He patrols a nice broad stretch of territory, which showcases how big and expansive the maps are gonna be. He seems more tranquil during the time of plenty, more savage and wild when the sandstorm rolls in, as they're advertising that the animals will behave in this game. He looks to be your monster that shows off a glimpse of just all all the cool things that the Monster Hunter Wilds team is bringing to the table with this game. He's gonna be kind of a thesis statement monster for Wilds, the way that Anjanath and kind of Great Jagras do for World. And, they do that, they go that angle, which is kind of like a normal animal. Unlike Anjanath, he's not some big fire-breathing T-Rex. Unlike Magdalmalo, who is your big look-at-me monster for Rise, he's not an exploding purple samurai tiger. Dude's getting this huge push, and he's just a big, fugly, savage bear lion. No crazy abilities, no projectiles, no elements, no nothing. And this is the dude up in front. I think that speaks incredibly highly of the developer's confidence about Doshiguma, about the tone and style they're going for with the game, and about, Wilds as a whole. There's a chance I'm reading too deep into things. It could be as simple as the developers saying, Doshiguma is one of the few monsters we have right now that's fully, completely done. Here you go, look at him for a while. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. Sure, the big lightning wyvern's probably going to be all over the next trailer. And since I'm pretty sure he's not the flagship based off some comments, whatever the actual flagship is will eventually get this big, massive spotlight when he gets rolled out. But for now, Doshiguma has been the guy used to show us what Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be all about. He's the face of the game so far. And I love that they decided to make the ambassador of the game this monster that breaks some of the conventional Monster Hunter design rules and goes for a much more weathered and rugged look. I'm a fan of it. I really am. And I hope he's fun to fight, man. Big, lumbering, brutal. I hope he really gets to show off what the pack mechanic can do. I want that to feel dangerous. Monster Hunter has a lot of, really good big bruiser savages. It's an archetype that they do really well. And this guy, I think, is gonna fit into that archetype alongside stuff like Nergigante and Diablos and Tigrex pretty damn well. Then you got Chatacabra. He's the monster we've seen the least of, and I'd say I have the least to say about him, but I still like him. He's pretty immediately charming, and he's a creature I could definitely see being ripped out of a 4th generation Monster Hunter game, only to be, drastically graphically updated for Wilds. He's the one that I think is probably the most Monster Hunter-y looking monster that we've had the best look at so far. And I think it's mostly the eyes. Doshiguma has the tiny little beady black eyes that are almost completely obscured by the tough skin. You can't see the whites of them at all. They're not particularly expressive, and we'll talk about Balahara in a bit, but Chatacabra has these small, bright yellow reptilian eyes, and I think the teal blue colors help a lot too. Definitely looks a lot more conventional, and that's a good thing. And cool thing about him too, brand new amphibian monster, and the first to heavily deviate from the frog-like stance and skeleton that the category has used historically. Instead, I think he's using Garangolm's more gorilla-inspired design. He's got the hunched posture and the broad shoulders and the knuckle walking. If you listen to a lot of my work, I love it when a monster rolls up and breaks some kind of pre-established rule set of a monster category. Because if you do that and you do it well, you execute it in a manner that makes sense, you have this open door to expand the possibilities of that monster category drastically. And, just in general, it's great to get another amphibian so soon after Tetranodon, because the amphibians are this group of monsters that they rolled up in Monster Hunter 4, they were introduced in there, and alongside the spiders, the Temnocerans, and the snake wyverns, they got brought in, but those categories have not been fleshed out too deeply yet. So getting to 4 on the roster for the amphibians is a really good way to legitimize and solidify and start playing around with that group a lot more. And I like that they went with an amphibian. I think Chatacabra has a decent chance of being the lowest level monster in the Windward Plains. He's got no pack, his roar doesn't stun you, and he's got a trait to him that I haven't seen any other monster have, where he seems to turf war with small monsters, with like a raptor pack, and it looks like he can be potentially overwhelmed by them. So yeah, you have coordinated groups of small monsters are a threat to this guy. It's unfortunate for him, but as a development for turf wars, it's very intriguing. His attacks also don't seem too fast, too big, though they do look a bit more threatening and a bit more varied than something that, like great Jaguars would pull out. We don't know too much about it yet, but he has a gimmick where he can attach bits of stone to his forelimbs with an adhesive saliva. I'm assuming this is going to give him probably increased damages with his fists, maybe some better armor, or just, worse hit zones on his forelimbs. I'm holding out a little bit of hope that there's different types of rocks he can attach to himself for different effects. If Chatacabra is the starter boss monster of Wilds, I think that's a pretty good pick. We've definitely never started a game with an amphibian before. He has an interesting looking combat gimmick, really good design. The combat design itself looks pretty fun so far. Probably still pretty easy, but that's what you expect from a monster on that level. Definitely a chance he's not the opening boss monster of the game, but I do think it'd be kind of weird if we haven't seen that first boss and we're already on trailer 3, coming up on trailer 4. If he is the starting monster, I think he has potential to be pretty high up on the list of the best starting monsters in Monster Hunter. And now let's talk about Lahara. So if Doshiguma is a scary looking, rugged weirdo that breaks Monster Hunter design conventions, this Nightmare Snake firmly establishes that Doshiguma isn't a one and done. Wilds is going to be set in a pretty damn scary region of this world. Our first 6th generation Leviathan is a sand tunneling freak of nature that works in a pack to create quicksand traps and drag other animals down into underground caverns where they'll be presumably devoured. One of these alone, that's a horror monster. They operate in groups of like 6 to 7, and they're shooting out like dark balls of sludge at you. I don't think we know what type of element or debuff it gives you, but it'll do something. I love the very simple black and orange color palette, the well-textured bumps and ridges all over the body, the fleshy tri-fold mouth he's got, the odd electrical glow deep in his throat, and the crazy-looking rows of tiny, beady blue eyes hidden in his mouth. It's been pointed out a couple of times to me, and like across the internet in general, that this eye design has absolutely been taken from clams and other species of mollusks. Dude, how do they even think of that? When you combine the 3 jaws and like the gnarled, scattered, misshapen teeth and the drool and the glow and the bizarre, almost kind of like layered looking jaw structure, and then you wrap it all up with like 24 of these tiny, piercing, soulless little eyes all watching you. It's crazy. An amazing looking creature design. And then, you look at it move, right? And I love the fast-paced, persistent, aggressive way the Balahara lunges up out of the sand and at you. I love how overwhelming it looks to be assailed by a whole group of them at once. I love that they can create their own environmental hazards for you and other monsters, and, look at them like wrapping around rock formations and attacking you up there. I've been dying, for monsters to utilize their environments more to their advantage in these games. This one animation of them going up there and coiling around the rocks gives me so much joy, and it floods my brain with possibilities for what new and returning monsters can do in a game like this, where it lets them act like this. Can this finally be the game where Nargacuga is this tree-scaling, nocturnal ambush predator that he was born to be and he keeps being sold as? I want that mega bad in this game. And while we're talking about returning fan favorites, it seems like the 5th generation Leviathan curse might have been broken. It's a little early to call, but Balahara seems to have the same belly-dragging Leviathan stance that Agnaktor and Lagiacrus have. That particular skeleton's been an infamous problem child for the developers due to the uneven terrain of the 5th generation games, and it makes the clipping with the long belly a nightmare for them to get around. But here we have Balahara on terrain that's not flat, with his belly looking to be on the ground. He's even got Agnaktor's drill dig animation in a cutscene they showed of him. Now, granted, he is on sand, which is terrain that would be more forgiving with model clipping, for sure, but it looks like they may have finally got things working properly. Whether that means we get Agnaktor back and shallow water fights with Lagiacrus in a rainforest or something, only time's gonna tell, but this could very well mean that the original Leviathan model is free to return, and that snake wyverns might also be able to come back. And then we got our big boy, right? We have the railgun wyvern, or Thor Magala, or Radau, if an Italian article is to be believed. No official name or render of the guy has been publicly released yet. There are, however, some YouTubers and press who did get a good look at him behind closed doors at Summer Games Fest, and they all seemed pretty impressed by the guy. I think it was Maximilian Dude who said that this one in particular seems a little bit more in line with a more traditional Monster Hunter big boss dragon in terms of fight and design, which, is good to hear. I do like that Doshiguma and Balahara are these mold breakers, but you still want to have the mold itself around for cohesion's sake. We know precious little about our big flying lightning friend, but from what has been released in interviews, it seems that he is not the flagship of Wilds, and instead serves solely as the apex monster of the Windward Plains. From the Summer Games Fest footage and commentary, it also would appear that he only, or at least more commonly, operates during the hostile storms that ravage the windswept plains. He's got a really good looking color palette with the gold and the purple. I think that looks great. The stance that he has in the cutscene has the wing arms planted on the ground, very Soregios-like. It'd be cool if they duplicate that animation. He also looks like he's gonna be gigantic. So if you look at the perspective in the trailer, it makes it a little rough to tell at first, but his wingspan just eclipses Doshiguma. And then you roll back the footage and you look at the trailers with Doshiguma really up and close compared to you. Dosha's huge. So how big is Raydao gonna be? And then the wing shape too, especially, I think it looks amazing with the big violet blade end looking things coming up off the top like that. It's got a good wingspan that's a silhouette that's gonna help him stand out. And then all that we've seen from him combat-wise is just that tremendous thunderbolt attack, which comes firing off of his front horns. And if you look at the trailers, it's got like a Godzilla -1 effect going on, where the spikes partially eject from the body, then he rips off the big attack as they come shooting back in, and it's a little tough to see. But after he fires off the bolt of lightning, you can watch his horns start to turn outwards and towards the sides of his head. So is that going to be like a physical indicator of his big attack being on cooldown? If so, that's wicked unique. I don't think any other monster's got something like that. I'm stoked to see this guy in full glory eventually. He looks mega cool. And apparently this ain't the flagship, which is awesome. So what the hell is that dude gonna be, And then with monster number 5, there's 2 easy jokes to make about Rathalos. It's either, there's also a mysterious new red dragon from the reveal trailer that we've not seen since, or, oh joy, I was nervous they wouldn't bring Rathalos back. If I made that joke, I apologize. Those are easy. They're boring. If you've been watching my content for a while, you know that this is a Rathalos appreciation household. After that stellar outing that he had in Rise and Sunbreak, I am legitimately excited to see what Rathalos brings to the table in Wilds. Considering the praise for his combat redesign in that game, I've got my fingers crossed that the developers listen to that and they'll retain most of the moveset improvements, and, inevitably they're going to add a little bit of their own. So I want to know, man, what is Rathalos capable of doing in a game like this? I'm curious to see what this much more open space is gonna really let him do. I want to see how he hunts out here. I want to see him light the savanna grass on fire. I want to see how his fight's gonna change now that he has this big, expansive, open range to stretch his wings out in. I want to see what Rathalos and Rathian can do as a team, because with the pack system they're bringing in, those two have to be able to pair up properly and fight you as a cohesive unit. Iceborne had that neat idea where they added a sound effect where they can call each other for help, but I want to see the Wraths fight in tandem. I want to see some genuine teamwork between the two. And then, as a super turbo nerd detail, the reveal trailer has Rathalos let out a cry from the Wraths pre-5th generation collection of sound effects. If that sticks for the full game, that'd be great, because the original Wrath sound design is definitely better than the World and Rise sounds. And from the very distant perspective shot that we got, the colors seem to be more dark and more saturated than the 5th generation Rathalos model. So potentially you have a better colored post-Sunbreak Rathalos with partner mechanics and his better sound design back. So I am legitimately excited to see him in action in this game. Alright, so before we wrap up this little video of ours, let's do a bit of guesswork here. Have some fun with this. So, can we extrapolate anything about Wilds' gameplay based on the monster design? I talked about this a little bit at the top. I think there's a non-0% chance that this will be one of the more challenging Monster Hunter titles that we've had in a couple of years. More so than I think the 5th generation games at the very least. Looking at the art design, the creature design, and also what we've heard about directly from the developers in the interviews they've done, Monster Hunter Wilds wants to be a game that has a more dangerous atmosphere to it. You have World, it was sold on its grandeur, Rise was sold on its action and its pace, and Wilds is now being sold on its hostility, with, some familiar elements of World's grandiosity mixed in. If they're going to go with a more dangerous angle for Monster Hunter Wilds' atmosphere, it stands to reason that the developers would want to create a game that offers up some decent challenge to the players. And if they can't, then it becomes more difficult to take Wilds' savage tone seriously. Now, is Wilds' difficulty gonna harken back to that of Monster Hunter 1 and DOS, even like Tri-Ultimate? Probably not, just from taking into consideration the quality of life that does exist and some of the stuff that hunters can do now. No, I don't think it's ever going to become that difficult again, unless they crank the numbers considerably. But we definitely need to avoid another base game Monster Hunter Rise situation, where the monsters could just be obliterated for the majority of the game without too much effort put into it. Thankfully, we know that Monster Hunter's developers do listen to their player base, and the outcry that Rise was too easy was particularly loud, and that stands as one of the game's most prominent criticisms. Wilds isn't going to be kneecapped by COVID in its development, at least not nearly as much, and has much more development time than any of its predecessors. So I think it's going to be able to overcome a lot of the hindrances that Rise's development found itself in. Personally, I'd like something that is a bit more challenging than World's base game. Noticeably so, but not by too much. Mostly, I just want the monsters to hit a little harder in the early game, and I'm hoping that there aren't any player abilities that are blatantly overpowered. And it is the creature design that offers up some reassurance that this could very well be the case. Doshaguma and Balahara are ghastly big brutes that I so far think are excellent evolutions of the series' creature design. I'm also encouraged by the whole pack mechanic thing that's going on in this game. Seems to be a very big selling point of it. Though it does look like the monster behaviors shift slightly and aren't all guns blazing all the time when fighting as a pack. They kind of seem to have their own separate kind of pack animations and aren't always just fighting completely at random. I still have a good feeling that these large groups of predators will be a legitimate threat. I feel like it should be the case that 5 or 6 Doshaguma put together could quite easily take down a hunter that would normally be able to handle one of them just fine. You're going to want to split those packs up or call in backup to manage that obstacle. And then, we look at a monster like our Railgun Wyvern, and he's being marketed as a regional apex, a beast that is on a similar power level to Rathalos or Diablos or Legiana. That's where those guys were positioned in World. But you take a look at what little we've seen of him, and that sheer output of power, as well as how huge he is, it all looks to completely eclipse some of those monsters I just mentioned. And then you got Chatakabra, who's probably going to be one of the weakest monsters in Wilds, but he also just looks more burly and brutish and tough than several other monsters in the series history that fill in this lower power slot. The strength, the tenacity, the grit of the monsters in Wilds looks to be a very natural step up from the previous Monster Hunter games. And this design choice sells the game's identity and tone very well, while also giving some reason to believe that Wilds aims to reignite some of Monster Hunter's challenging reputation. The bestiary of Monster Hunter Wilds is impressing me so far, and that's awesome because that's what a Monster Hunter game really needs to get right. And we only know 5 of the bosses on the roster so far, but I'm thrilled with what I'm seeing. If you want to hear me talk more about why I'm excited for Monster Hunter Wilds, I recently put out a video talking about how it is reimagining the classic Seasons mechanic from Monster Hunter DOS. But for now, this has been CR-Volcanic or Connor. I'll see you around. Shout out to all the patrons, and special shout out to Nihilist Chimerax, Datboy Doin Ding, Sir Newt Newt, Peaberry, Stefan Colneen, Shaggy Grizzly, Psychotic Jester, Pecco Plush, Daniel Delasarte, and Call Sign Shadow. Thank you very much, everyone.